There's a very particular rhythm you start to notice when you spend time with All in the Family. And it's not the rhythm of punchlines or setups or even traditional story beats. It's something quieter and, in a strange way, more familiar, like the sound of a conversation that has happened so many times before that everyone in the room already knows how it's going to go, even as they keep having it anyway. And there's one kind of episode where that rhythm becomes almost the entire point. Where disagreement isn't a surprise, it's a routine. It's a pattern that repeats itself so naturally that it almost feels like part of the furniture in that living room. You can imagine the scene without even needing a big introduction, because the setting does so much of the work. That same couch, that same chair, that same small space where everything seems to happen. And Archie is there, settled into his spot like he always is, carrying that presence that feels both grounded and immovable, like nothing in that room is going to shift him unless it absolutely has to. And even then, maybe not. Moves through the room with that gentle, almost careful energy, like she's aware of the emotional temperature even before anyone says anything. And Gloria is nearby, already sensing the possibility of tension, not because anything has happened yet, but because it always does. And Mike is there with that look, that quiet readiness, like he knows that whatever comes next is going to land somewhere he can't just ignore. And it starts the way it always starts. Not with a big moment, not with a dramatic reveal, but with a comment, something simple, something that on the surface might not even seem worth arguing about. Maybe something about how things used to be, or how things are changing, or how they shouldn't be changing at all. And Archie says it in that way he has, not asking for agreement, not inviting discussion, just stating it, like it's obvious, like it's settled. And the interesting thing is, nobody in the room is surprised. That's what makes it routine. Mike doesn't look shocked. Gloria doesn't react like this is new. Even in her gentle way, seems to recognize the direction things are about to take. And there's this quiet moment, almost like a pause before a familiar piece of music starts playing again. And then Mike responds. Not loudly, not immediately confrontational, but clearly, firmly enough that it signals what's coming next. And Archie reacts exactly the way you'd expect. Not by reconsidering, not by softening, but by pushing back, by reinforcing what he just said, maybe even sharpening it a little. And just like that, they're in it again. The same argument, the same positions, the same emotional beats. And what makes this so fascinating is that the show doesn't treat it like something that needs to be avoided or fixed. It treats it like something that exists, something that's part of their relationship, part of their daily life, something that will happen whether anyone wants it to or not. As the conversation continues, you start to notice how it unfolds almost like a ritual. Archie makes a point, Mike challenges it. Archie defends it, Mike pushes further, and the specifics might change. The topic might shift slightly, but the structure remains the same. It's not about discovering something new. It's about replaying something familiar. And Gloria gets drawn into it in that way she always does, caught between frustration and emotional investment, trying to keep things from going too far while also not being able to stay completely neutral. Because how could she? When the disagreement isn't just abstract, it's about values, about identity, about the people she cares about. Tries to soften things, to redirect, to bring a sense of calm into the room. And sometimes she succeeds for a moment. Sometimes she gets a small laugh, a brief easing of the tension, but it never lasts because the routine is stronger than any single interruption. The argument keeps finding its way back. And that's where the show becomes something more than just a comedy, because it's not using the argument as a setup for jokes. It's using the argument as the story itself, the repetition, the familiarity, the inevitability of it all becomes the core of the episode. You start to feel that inevitability as a viewer, that sense that no matter what anyone says, no matter how reasonable or emotional or persuasive it might be, the outcome isn't going to change, because the outcome isn't the point. The point is the process, or the act of disagreeing, the way it defines the space between these characters. And Archie's worldview sits right at the center of it, not just as a source of conflict, but as a kind of anchor, something that holds everything in place even as it creates friction. Because his perspective isn't just an opinion, it's something deeply tied to how he understands the world, how he understands his role in it, and that makes it resistant to change. Mike's challenges don't weaken that worldview. They reinforce it. Because every challenge feels like a threat, and every threat triggers a defense, and that defense becomes stronger the more it's tested. At the same time, Mike isn't changing either. He's not softening his stance. He's not stepping back and deciding it's not worth it. If anything, the routine of the argument gives him more reason to engage, because it feels like something that needs to be addressed, something that can't just be left alone. And that's where the routine becomes a trap, because both sides are locked into it. Not consciously, not intentionally, but through repetition, through habit, through the way their identities have become tied to these positions. And the living room, that small, familiar space, amplifies everything. It doesn't give them anywhere to go physically or emotionally. It keeps them close, keeps the conversation contained, keeps the tension from dissipating. It's almost like the room itself expects this. Like it's seen it before. Like it knows how it will go. And as the episode moves forward, you start to notice something else. Something quieter, but just as important. The way the argument starts to lose its urgency. Not because it's resolved, but because it's been repeated so many times that it becomes part of the background, part of the rhythm of their lives. That doesn't mean it's harmless. If anything, it makes it more complicated, because the routine masks the impact, the emotional wear and tear, the way these repeated disagreements shape the relationships over time. Gloria feels it in those moments where her patience starts to slip, where the familiarity of the argument doesn't make it easier. It makes it more frustrating, because she knows exactly where it's going and she can't stop it. Feels it in her quiet attempts to keep things kind, to remind everyone of what matters beyond the argument, even when she knows that reminder won't change the outcome. And as a viewer, you feel it too. That mix of humor and discomfort, Because there are funny moments. There are moments where the repetition itself becomes comedic. The predictability, the way you can almost anticipate the next line of reasoning, the next response, the next escalation. But there's also something heavier underneath. A sense that this isn't just entertainment. It's observation. It's reflection. It's showing you something real about how people interact, especially in a time like the 1970s, when so many of these conversations were happening across the country, in living rooms just like this one, about issues that didn't have easy answers, about changes that didn't feel comfortable or universally accepted. The show was groundbreaking because it didn't shy away from that reality. It didn't pretend that these conversations could be neatly resolved in half an hour. It didn't smooth over the rough edges. It let them stay rough. It let the discomfort exist alongside the humor. And that's why it still feels relevant, because the idea of disagreement becoming routine, of arguments repeating without resolution, of people holding their ground not out of stubbornness alone, but out of something deeper that hasn't gone away. If anything, it's become more visible, more recognizable. And by the time the episode reaches its end, there's no big conclusion, no moment where someone finally changes their mind or sees things differently. There's just a kind of settling, a return to normal, which in this case includes the disagreement. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't get resolved. It just becomes part of the ongoing rhythm again. And that's what makes it linger, what makes it feel honest in a way that a more traditional ending wouldn't. Because real life doesn't always offer resolution. Sometimes it offers repetition. Sometimes it offers routine. And sometimes, the most truthful thing a show can do is let that routine play out without trying to fix it. Personally, I find that kind of storytelling strangely comforting and a little unsettling at the same time, because it acknowledges something we all recognize, even if we don't always want to admit it, that some disagreements don't go away. They become part of the relationship, part of the conversation, part of the way people connect and clash at the same time. And sitting with that, watching it unfold in that small living room, you start to see the brilliance of the show not just in what it says, but in what it refuses to resolve. It trusts you to notice the pattern, to feel the repetition, to understand that sometimes the story isn't about change. It's about what happens when change doesn't come. And maybe in its own quiet way, that's what makes it feel so real, so lasting, so worth returning to, even when you already know exactly how the conversation is going to go.